Marianne, I just did this setup on Monday and something didn't work. Can you say something? I want to see if I'm actually hearing.
Hi. Can you hear
Okay,
me?
I can hear you.
Okay.
Now, try that again.
Can you hear me now?
Ah, excellent.
Okay.
Whatever I did on Monday, it caused this feedback loop.
Okay. Okay.
And so that's great. I can only hear it here, not through the speakers.
No. Okay. So while you're here, I'm going to share my screen. And then I'm going to share the PowerPoint. And so now I have to get it so that you see so you don't see the sidebar thing. Oh, so from beginning, there we go.
I think you do, yeah.
Yeah, and then to get it to switch.
I think
to
if
the
you
next,
hit your
there we
space
go.
bar.
Yeah, okay.
I don't remember how you go
Yes.
backwards. There is a way to go backwards.
Okay, if just tapping on the screen is making it go backwards.
Oh,
Okay.
excellent.
Okay.
Or was it just going forwards?
No, it went backwards, I
Okay.
think. Well, maybe it didn't.
There may be buttons that you can't see. Often
Right.
there's a button on the left and on the right.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
if you hit the right spot of the...
Okay. But
and then
anyway,
from the
yes.
beginning is great.
Right, from the beginning. There we go. All right, I can stop the share. Okay, good. I just wanted to, I've done it,
Yeah.
but I don't remember.
I don't do PowerPoint enough to remember anything.
Yeah,
I do it, but
and then, okay, and then there's doing PowerPoint, and then there's doing PowerPoint on Zoom,
yeah,
like,
yeah, right.
So, and,
Can you make me co-host and I can bring mine up and see if that works?
nope, I'm doing the wrong thing. Okay, let's see. Participants and make co-host. There we go.
So this should be mine. Can you see that okay?
Yep. Yep.
Great.
Okay.
It's the same thing we had earlier, but I just made it easier to follow.
Yep. Okay.
So, great.
Good. Okay. All right. Good.
I love being able to test things first.
Oh, yes. Yes. Yes.
Oh.
And it's just, it's just, we're just doing a lot.
Yep.
I think we're doing a lot.
Yep.
So, yeah. Okay. And then, like I'm going to read what's on my slides and then talk a little bit about what's on my slides. And, really I'm planning on like this. I read this. This is like 6 minutes it takes to read and talk about this. And that's long enough, and then there's you, and then Jim Walton from the Finance Committee.
Mhm.
And
questions.
and questions. Yes. And Kate's going to start the whole thing off and moderate it. And she wrote a nice script for the introduction. And I read that this morning. Um, so, so we're all working together.
Yeah.
So, okay. So. Okay. And I'm just going to wait to let people in until it's a little closer. Unless they're, you know, it's recording. I'm just going to wait till 6:55.
Yeah. I logged in early because I wanted to run my trial.
Yeah.
I have an external monitor. It just died.
Oh, no.
It's been going. It sort of was of questionable value, but now it's totally no value. So I have this little computer monitor.
Yeah.
Everything crammed into it.
Today is my father's birthday. He's not alive anymore, but May 11th, 1935, he was born. So I don't know how old that makes him. Would have made him if he was still alive, which he's not. So not that old. I think he was 80, 79 or 80 when he died.
We've been tearing our house apart. And every day the builder says, we need to get into that room next. So I've been moving everything all over the place.
Yes.
He told me that they were going to, there's a wall we have to take out. Actually, 2 walls we have to take out, and one of them inside. And he said, we're going to get to that today. So I cleared everything out, and they didn't get to it today.
Yeah.
Oh, well.
Oh, well.
But it's moving. I'm happy with that.
And who's the builder?
John Rathbun, who's down near Clark Excavating. He's in that part of Shutesbury.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. I'm going to get a tissue, and then I'm going to let people in. There's just a few people waiting. All right, and I'm just going to make sure, since I don't see any other trustees, everything we ever said about this said it started at 7, right?
Everything I've seen.
All right.
Actually, I can't remember. What I did was I went to the calendar, and the town calendar said 7, so I said, well, that's it.
Gonna check one thing.
Do you want me to email people?
Sure. Just for, when we set this up, I thought it would be good to start. 7. Okay. It would be good to start at 7, just because we've been going so late, Okay, I am going to admit both. Oh, good. Kate's here. Okay. And okay. Doesn't show.
Hi.
Hi. Oh, it's not quite 7.
Marianne, you're pretty quiet.
Well, because I'm not really talking. Can you hear me now?
Yep, that's
Okay. Yeah. All right. I'm just kind of muttering to myself.
okay.
So, okay. All right. Okay.
Marianne, Kate, is this an official meeting that needs minutes?
Yes. It's a posted meeting.
Yes, it's a regular meeting of the trustees, assuming that we have a quorum.
I'm letting people in. Here's Tim.
Okay, Marianne, I don't know how many people you have in the waiting room.
Everybody is in so far.
Okay.
But I'm letting someone in. Okay.
I think we'll just
So-
wait a couple of minutes, if that's okay, folks, so that everyone who wants to be here can be.
And while we wait, and while our secretary isn't here, I was starting to write down names. One of you is Howell. Could you give us a first name?
Howell was his first name. His last name is Lee.
Lee, thank you. And there was a phone number. 887-8505. If you could let us know who you are, that would be great.
I was writing down names too.
Hi, that phone number is me. It's Gail Huntress. I'm
okay.
I'm signed in on a phone as well as Zoom.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's Melanie. Hey, Melanie, between Brad and I, we have all the names, so don't worry about getting them, okay? I think we'll get them all between the two of us.
Do we know Craig's last name?
Must be, is it Craig,
Martin, maybe?
Craig Martin?
Yeah, I just sent it to you in the chat.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Excellent.
There's Matt Audio. Matt F. Audio. Who is Matt F?
That's Matt Franz.
Okay. Oh, from the Friends. Okay.
Yeah.
And S. Mayer?
That's Sean Meyer.
Sean Meyer?
Mm-hmm.
And somebody.
Is that Diane Jacoby?
Diane, can you answer if that's you? Also, we have someone that just says Howell.
That's Howell Lee.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Diane Jacoby, Jacoby.
Thank you, Diane.
You're welcome.
Okay. Can whoever's typing be on mute?
Oh, that's me.
Thank you. Actually, could everyone go ahead and be on mute for a bit till we get started? Thank you. All right, I am just checking for trustees to make sure that we have a quorum. We have me, Brad, Michelle, Melanie, and Tim. Is that right? So yes, that is a quorum of the library trustees. Thank you. So good evening, everyone, and welcome to the meeting, this meeting of the Board of Library Trustees. This meeting will come to order, noting that we are meeting on Zoom, as is allowed under open meeting law. This meeting is being recorded, and the recording will be available until the minutes are approved and posted. I'd like to thank everyone for coming. I'd like to thank Jim Walton, who's the chair of the Finance Committee, for being here, and Rita Farrell, who's the chair of the Select Board, for joining us this evening. And I'd like to welcome and thank all the guests tonight. Thank you so much, everybody, for making time to be here. So this meeting is intended to serve as a place for the public to ask questions about the proposed new library project. And here's how we're going to proceed. First, our library director, Marianne, will give an overview of the building program. And next, our treasurer, Brad, will give an overview of the cost estimates. And finally, Rita and Jim, along with Marianne and other trustees, will answer questions. And before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge with gratitude everyone who's been participating in this process over the past year. We've seen such dedication, creativity, enthusiasm, energy, and oversight. And all of these are valuable forms of community service. The trustees have heard input and have tried to find the right balance of size and function for a new building, while still specifying a library that will meet the town's needs for at least the next 20 years as required by the grant. I'd like to ask all of us to consent to some communication agreements during this meeting. First, ask that we please all be kind, respectful, and patient. Assume that we all want what's best for our town, even if we see that differently. And then ask that we use the chat function to post questions. Right down at the bottom for my system is a chat button, and you can just click on it and type your questions in there. Just acknowledging that we have received a couple of questions via the library trustees email address, and we'll get to those first in the question and answer period. And then finally, reminding the trustees, I'll read the questions out loud. Trustees, please remember we cannot answer questions or discuss anything in the chat. And then finally, everyone will be muted except the person who's currently presenting, answering questions, or moderating. Okay. I would like to ask, if you agree to these communication agreements, if you will please raise your hand. It would be easier for me, yes, if you could raise your hand virtually clicking that button. Yeah, y'all, it's not your first rodeo on ZMIC. We'll wait for everyone to have a chance to raise their hands. So again, I see a few people who haven't yet raised their hands to agree with these communication agreements. Okay. Still have some folks who haven't. Just want to make sure that we're all starting in the same place. Okay, Joan, I see that your hand is raised. Thank you. Amanda and John, do you have concerns about the communication agreements? That's John, Lawless, and Amanda. Your hands aren't raised, so I want to confirm that you're okay before we proceed. Okay, close enough for rock and roll. I say we go forward. Everyone can put your hands down again. Thank you so much for that. All right. Now I'm going to turn it over to Marianne Antonellis, our library director, for an overview of the proposed building program. Go right ahead, Marianne. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here. I'm going to share my screen and share a little presentation about the building program. Okay, there we go. So tonight we're talking about the small library pilot project and a new Shutesbury library. The small library pilot project's goal is to help one small town build a new library that's economical. I have to move you so I can see my screen. Sorry, efficient and flexible. We have been mindful of express concern about operating costs for a larger building. The building program specifies an open floor plan with good sight lines designed to be managed by the same size staff we have now. More space will allow the library to accommodate volunteers safely and effectively. So there won't be increased staffing costs for the new library. Staffing is by and large the largest operating cost in any library. And we've thought a lot about sustainability in our specifications in the building program. We specified fossil-free, net zero, well-researched modern technology for cooling, heating, and ventilation, such as solar and heat pump technology. These systems will have higher upfront costs, but will result in a lower life cycle cost for the building. The spaces called for in our library building program can be broken down into 5 categories: spaces for collections, spaces for people, functional spaces, unassigned spaces, and outdoor spaces. So for collections, we have 1,345 square feet. We have 635 square feet for the adult collections. That's enough room for 6,000 books, 2,000 DVDs, a nice collection of music, CDs, and audiobooks, magazines, new and seasonal items, and a library of things. We have 570 square feet for children's collections. That's enough room for 7,000 books, 400 DVDs, some audiobooks, a children's library of things, and space for our STEAM activity station. We have 90 square feet for the teen collections. That's enough room for 1,400 books. And then we'll have some space at the circulation desk for circulating items, the library of things, and laptops and tablets. The most exciting thing about a new library for the town of Shutesbury is space for people. And our building program calls for 1,865 square feet for people. There'll be 100 feet for computer area, a small reading nook that's 100 square feet, a children's room. The children's room will have 330 square feet just dedicated to the people. There'll be a multi-purpose community meeting room that's 700 square feet. There'll be a lobby that's 200 square feet. The lobby and the community meeting room kind of go together. The community meeting room will be accessible for programming and community meetings after hours when the rest of the library is closed, and people will access it through the lobby, and the restrooms will be off of there. And you know, the lobby is someplace where people will be waiting for a ride or parking their stroller or meeting people. So those two things kind of go together. There'll be some periodical seating area that's 150 square feet. There's some room for people to mill around in the reception and browsing area. There'll be a small study room that's 200 square feet. That room could be used for a tutor to meet with a student. It could be used for someone who's working from home to do a conference, and it could accommodate a small meeting of up to 8 people. And then in the team room, there's 110 square feet for people. And it won't switch to the next slide. Why won't it switch to the next slide? Oh, there we go. And then we have functional spaces. And for functional spaces, we have 863 square feet specified. There'll be a closet off the community meeting room for tables and chairs and program supplies. There's going to be 250 square feet at the circulation desk. There's going to be a small director's office. There's going to be a staff workroom that's 240 square feet. The interior book return needs its own little fire safe room, and that's 48 square feet. There'll be a kitchenette off the community meeting room that's 80 square feet. And then there'll be a telecom closet someplace in this library that's only 15 feet. So the total indoor assigned space is 4,223 square feet. That's the collections and the people and the functional spaces added together. And then the MBLC requires adding 30% to the total square footage for unassigned space. Unassigned space includes functional spaces for which square footage has not been specified, and interior and exterior walls and hallways. So the battery storage room, the janitor's closet, the mechanical room, restrooms are all unassigned spaces. And with this 30% added, the total indoor space is 5,490 square feet. And then we've got some outdoor space. The pandemic, we've always done outdoor programming, not just because we don't have space for indoor programming in the library, but because we like to be outside. In Shutesbury, we have beautiful outdoor spaces. But the pandemic has really highlighted the need for comfortable outdoor programming space. So we've specified an attached covered porch with retractable mosquito screens. The Leverett Library director told us about concerts and little events out on their patio in the evenings, and everybody having to come inside because of mosquitoes. And that porch will be 700 square feet. And then we're going to have a 200-foot attached outdoor storage shed with our kayaks in mind and other seasonal outdoor furnishings. And finally, the final library building program is included in our town's application for the Small Library Pilot Project. And it's posted on the Small Library Pilot Project webpage on mnspear.org. And I'm happy to answer questions now or by email. And I'm going to stop sharing. There we go.
Thank you so much, Marianne. So yeah, because we're going to be presenting a lot of information tonight, I wanted to make an opportunity for people to ask questions as we go, instead of expecting everyone to remember and put them in at the end. So if anyone has questions about the building program for Mary Ann, could you please let us know? I'm taking a moment to just check on the questions that we received via email, and I just want to check. Okay, I think there's an email question that is appropriate to ask now, so I'm going to read it out loud. And Mary Ann, this is for you, please. This is for a question from Mike Binsky. Mike's asking, part of the reason for a new library building is to be able to function during a pandemic. During COVID-19, the library appeared to flourish, increasing and expanding services, even though the actual building was closed for most of the time. And when it was open, capacity was limited. Why would you think in the next pandemic, the library would be allowed to be open? What's to say the next pandemic social distance constraint won't be greater than 6 feet and library capacity would again be limited? And why wouldn't services be provided just like in this pandemic? So I recognize that's a long and sort of complex question, Mary Ann. The first part is, in the next pandemic, why would you think the library would be allowed to be open?
Well, so I'm going to point to an example of a new, larger library in a small town that that opened as soon as they were able to open, according to the state guidelines. So Monterey, Massachusetts, which is in the Berkshires, has built a new library in the past 10 years. They're one of the 2 towns with fewer than 2,000 residents that have been able to participate in the small library, in the Massachusetts Public Library Construction Program. And so Monterey is a small town like Shutesbury, and they had a big, beautiful library with lots of space. You know, it's about, I think it's about 4,500 square feet. And as soon as the governor lifted the restrictions and allowed libraries to be open in June of 2020, the Monterey Library opened its doors because they had room for people to safely be inside. Our library at less than 900 square feet didn't open until, I think we opened in the fall of 2020 and then quickly closed. And then it wasn't until, I forget when we opened again. So we're still living in a pandemic. And it really, things feel a little bit safer now when the days are warmer and we can have the front door open. But we're limiting visitors to no more than 5 people at a time. We are really trying not to double up with staff people because if, you know, if I get sick and then I get Cynthia sick, then there's nobody to run the library. And Cynthia goes home to a 92-year-old dad. So thank you, Mike. I have worked really hard during the pandemic. It's been incredibly rewarding for me. I do feel like I've done a really good job and I've really risen to the occasion. I feel like I've had a lot of opportunities to be creative. And in the beginning of the pandemic, I was doing things. I was making take-home kits for children. I'm still doing that. And I had tables set up in the library because nobody was coming into the library. So I could have my work area in the library. And then when we were open again, I still wanted to make take-home kits for families. And so we're doing that in my dining room. So the services that you're applauding, Mike, and thank you. I really appreciate it that you've noticed and that you're appreciating my work. They're dependent on me using a room in my home. Did I get all of the parts of the question, Kate?
Got that first part. I mean, I would just add that, you know, a new library will have a place where people can wash their hands. Which is, you know, if we remember all the way back to March of 2020 when so much was unknown, But the one thing that stayed constant in public health advice all the way through is the importance of washing your hands. And then who's to say the next pandemic social distance constraint won't be greater than 6 feet? Well, no one can say that. But what we can say is that even if it were 12 feet, we would still be able to have more than 5 people in the building at a time, including staff. So I'm just going to go ahead and take that one myself. And I think, again, why services wouldn't be provided just like in this pandemic? Again, I think we're just, it is behind the scenes, but the services in this library rely tremendously on the generosity of Marianne using her basement and her house to store and prepare materials for the library. Thank you. Marianne, I'm going to just mute myself while I look through. I'm having to be on my phone and on the screen at the same time, so I collect all the questions. So give me just a second. Oh, so there's a couple more questions about sort of programming that I think we might as well just get to now. The first one is the library currently offers 6 to 10 programs a week. Most are held off-site, but some on-site. Why do these programs all have to be held in a library building? If the town already had a community center, would these programs be held there? And Marianne, I think, just speaking to the challenges of moving stuff around for programming would be helpful for people, again, to understand.
Right. So we don't have a community center. And again, if the library does travel with programming, and it creates extra work to load up the program supplies, drive them to the athletic club, drive them to the school, bring them over to town hall, and then bring them all back and put them all away again. Right now we're doing 2 story times a week in the basement of town hall, because families with small children really need to be able to gather with other families with small children, and then it's important for the children to be able to socialize and be with other children. We're doing 2 a week because we're limiting it to no more than 6 families at a time, even in that large space. And our story time providers their trunks are full of story time thing. So we're dependent on the generosity of our story time providers, who are both lovely women who live here in Shutesbury, and set aside time every Monday and Friday. So we don't have a community center. We don't have an empty building, an empty public building that's really accessible for programming. And if we did have a community center, maybe we'd be having a different conversation, but we don't. So the library will function as a community center.
Thank you, Marianne. And Anna Hurd is asking in the chat, is the space all on the same level, 1 story, no basement?
Library, and then we've specified a 1 story building with no basement. It'll be built on a concrete slab.
Thank you. I'm going to just again double check that I don't have any other space related questions by email. I don't think I do. Oh, I guess you could consider this a space related question from Amanda Alex. Are cleanup costs at lot 032 being figured into the cost of the proposed library? There's a lot of detail that Amanda has provided as part of this, but honestly, I can't type from my phone into the chat. So
is that in the library director email? Because I could read it. Okay.
It's in the trustees email.
Okay,
Marianne.
I'll look at it.
Okay, but the essence of the question is that we filed a release notification form for 120-day reporting and tracking. That the notice of responsibility notes that the department, this is the DEP, has reason to believe that property or portions thereof as a disposal site. And she's, you know, done her research and is providing sort of chapter and verse on this. So
So I think we will,
costs of cleanup costs.
I think I'll read Amanda's question, and if it's okay with you, Kate, and then we'll respond to Amanda by email after doing some research.
I have my hand up. Oh, you got your hand up?
Okay. Yes, thank you. Go ahead, Marianne.
Miriam.
Me? Okay. So I think we'll.
Okay, everyone mute, but Marianne, please, everyone.
Everyone mute but Marianne.
All right. So I think we'll research that question and we'll respond to Amanda by email. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. I think that I'm just double checking the chat, double checking the email, and making sure that I don't have any more space related questions. I don't believe I do. So with that, I think I will turn to Brad, please, for an overview of the cost estimates and kind of where we are on costs. Thank you, Marianne. Go ahead, Brad.
Hi, I'm going to share you a screen. Let me see if this is it. This came from a spreadsheet that the MBLC gave us, and we've posted it. I took it and reconfigured it to make it so that it's a little bit easier to read. But the Fennessy, the second estimate, is on the top, and RLB is on the bottom, and the details are all in there. Before I get into that, one of the key bits was already covered by Marianne. We spent, months from June until December working on the building program, and the result of the building program was the square footage number, along with a description of what we were trying to accomplish. So whole long story of all the work that went into that. But it ended up with, as Marianne noted, it ended up with 5,490 square feet, the indoor square footage. And that number was used by both of these estimators to come up with their estimate for the building costs. With each, well, before I mention that, the two estimates, the one on the bottom, RLB, is actually the first one. That was commissioned by the MBLC as part of their project. They did that for the two towns that submitted applications for this grant project. And various parts of that felt high to us. We, Marianne, for the most part, talked with the MBLC, and they talked with RLB, and various parts of that estimate were removed or lowered when all parties agreed that they were unnecessary. And so what you have here in the total adjusted, the adjusted part is basically meaning it's after all that work of coming up with a more accurate number. Once we got this number and felt like the total project cost and our total cost was more than we had hoped, Marianne, with the approval of the trustees, Marianne went and got another bid, and that was the Fennessy bid. So the top one, Fennessy, is one we contracted for, and the bottom one is one that the MBLC contracted for. The bids have various components. One of the largest components is direct building costs. Once we had worked with both of them, those two were very similar. Not identical. The RLB one was still higher, but it was instructive to us to feel like two different groups could come in with bids that weren't grossly out of line on direct construction costs. The biggest part of the differences were things like soft costs. The MBLC had started out with a number of 40% and for soft costs, and Fantasy looked at all that and said, well, really 30% should be more than enough. Soft costs cover professional fees, architectural work, engineering work. It also covers professional management of the project, and it covers FFE, furniture, fixtures, and equipment. A lot of the FFE are covered by the town. And you'll see in the chart, there are these two places where 50% soft costs. In this case, it's taking the total and dividing half of it to be eligible and half of it to be ineligible. I'll get to what those things mean in a minute. And then we have the total project costs. So these relate to each other in that sense. In this particular case, this contingency that is in the RLB bid is included in the total base bid of the Fantasy one. They weren't totally comparable, but the end up totals are the same kind of number. So then we get eligible and ineligible. The MBLC in its granting projects breaks it down into those two categories. And what that really means is eligible is the parts of the project that are eligible for their funding. And so they get added up. Here we have eligible base costs, eligible soft costs, and a total eligible. And then that number is the basis for the MBLC grant. This is 75% of the eligible total. And over here, we have 25% of that eligible total. That is the part we have to cover. So those are the eligible things, eligible and then 75%, and we get the MBLC grant amount. Ineligible, all of that is covered by the town. So there's a small amount of ineligible costs in the base construction. Then we have our identical share of the soft costs, and that gives us total ineligible, and we add to that the 25% of this, which is the 75-25% split of the grant. And that ends up with our total, 2.4 million in the case of Fantasy. In the case of RLB, 2.9 million. That felt to me like the most important parts. We, in the library trustees, in our meetings, we looked at both of these. One of the things I like with the trustees is that we don't all start out agreeing with each other, and we have to talk it through. And when we started the meeting talking about these two numbers, I wouldn't have told you which one we were going to come up with. And we talked through it until we all felt like this was the more accurate and more appropriate number. We're looking for something that truly reflects the expected cost of the project. The major difference is 30% for soft costs and 40% for soft costs. And the fact that we're covering half of that. So are there any questions? Kate, if there are, can you?
Yeah, I will. So I think just because it's really hard to see everyone as they interact, I think I'm going to ask you to take this down, Brad, to stop sharing your screen so I can see people. And then if we need to have you put it back up, I'll ask you to do that. So first, I do have some questions that came in online. Marianne, I see that your hand is up though. Is there something that you wanted to add to what Brad has said before we get into the question part?
Well, we missed one of the questions in the chat from my portion. So, and I don't have to answer it now, but I just wanted to make sure so Diane Jacoby asked, she said that she had seen two different figures for the size of the outdoor porch. She saw 900 square feet and 700 square feet. I've never seen 900 square feet listed for the outdoor porch. It's always been 700 square feet. If you could let us know where that is, Diane, we can work to correct it, but the outdoor porch is going to be 700 square feet. So that was all. Okay.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I don't know why I didn't see that question in the chat, but I still don't see it. So I really am grateful to others who are monitoring the chat, because for some reason that's still not showing up for me. All right, so we do have several questions. This is one that Diane also sent in. Diane asks, we've already seen a dramatic cost increase in this project. About 6 million followed a week later to about 8 million, followed by a revised cost estimate. It's not unusual for construction projects to go over budget once construction has started. So I just want to address this because we have not actually seen a dramatic cost increase. What we saw was a goof, okay? The MBLC made an error in communicating the RLB cost estimate to us at first, and then came back and said, we are so sorry. It is 8.3 million. So it's not the case that the estimate increased. It's a case that the estimate was reported to us incorrectly, okay? And then the revised, there is in fact no revised cost estimate. There are two completely independent cost estimates. One, as Brad explained, that was commissioned by the MBLC as part of their project evaluation, and one that was commissioned by the library trustees, okay? And those are independent. It's not the case that, at least as far as I understand, but Brad or Marianne can correct me, it's not the case that Tennessee looked at the RLB estimate and came up with their own. These are independent. They both looked at the building program.
Yes, that's right.
And did their own individual separate cost estimates, okay? I think that's really important to understand. Thank you for that question, Diane. And then there is, and I think this is a question on everyone's mind, is what happens if there's a cost overrun, okay? And there's a couple of different ways that we could think about this. But the first thing that I would like to point out is that as I understand this, and again, Marianne or Brad or others can correct me, but as I understand this, the town is responsible for 50% of the ineligible costs. I'm sorry, of the soft costs, I beg your pardon. And that those are ones that are very often under our control. Okay, we can make a lot of decisions about how we provide furnishings, fixtures, and equipment, for example. We can look for bargains. We can look for secondhand furniture. We can do a lot of different things to keep those soft costs down, all right? But for eligible costs, building costs, the MBLC grant will cover the actual project costs up to 75%. And the grant, so that, up to 75% of the total project costs, up to $6 million. Okay, so there is room in the grant space to cover up to 75% of any eligible cost overrun. That's a mouthful. So Brad or Marianne, can you just nod or jump in if I've stated anything incorrectly? Thanks.
I think all that's right. I think if there were cost overruns, the main point you made first, and that's the soft costs is the biggest part of our cost, and they're also the biggest thing that's in our control. We have a high expectation that we're going to be able to cut those down anyway. We have high expectation that we're going to raise additional money. We can't count either of those things in this grant project until it happens. But yes.
Thanks. I see Tim, library trustee, with his hand raised. So go ahead, please, Tim. Thanks.
Hi, Brad, you can double check me on this, please. But I believe that the figures for the building were based on expected costs in 2023. Is that correct?
They were, yes, they're based on current expected costs, and each estimate includes a construction contingency, an escalator for expected inflation based on what they're seeing today, not what they saw a long time ago. So there's quite a large expectation for inflation built in, construction inflation.
That's all I wanted to point out, that there's already some built-in safeguards to deal with. And if I remember, I think it's at least 400,000 on one of them. Is that still the case on the second estimate?
They were written in different ways. I don't think we can say that directly.
Okay.
Thank you. One other question. This question came in by email, and it's from Amanda, and it's for me. Amanda writes, she's quoting me from next door, where I said, from a general economic perspective, there are a few good reasons to borrow money, even when you have the cash. One is when the costs of borrowing are cheap because of low interest rates. This, in turn, keeps liquid assets liquid and available for emergencies. Another reason applies when you're building something for the benefit of future generations, like a new library. If you use up cash reserves, you're placing the whole payment burden on the people who live in Shutesbury now, not on any of the people who will move here during the term of the bond. They too will benefit from a new library, and in my view, should contribute to its cost. And Amanda says a week later that I changed my mind, saying that Shutesbury should use current reserves to reduce the borrowing costs on a prospective library. And Amanda is fairly asking me why the change of heart. Amanda, I sort of tried to address this at a FinCom meeting, but I do not believe that this represents a change of heart. I think that there is a difference between explaining why there might be a good economic reason to do something and stating position in favor of that thing. And you asked why a week later I added my comment about what, where I said on Nextdoor, I am in favor of a mix. And it's because the thread picked up again a week later. Okay, but I have never had a public position that all of the funds should be borrowed. I'm not on the FinCom. There's good reasons for that. Anybody who saw the error that I made on the chart yesterday will appreciate that there's good reasons why I'm not on the FinCom. But I don't think that this represents a change in position as much as an effort to explain something. Okay, thank you for that question. Let's see. Some of these other questions, it's a little bit tricky to figure out who they should go to and whether we might want to get FinCom involved. But I think this question actually is for the trustees and Marianne, and so I'm going to give us a try. And if we need help, Jim, I'm going to feel free to just pull you right in, okay? This is another question from Amanda, who writes, can the town guarantee that no more borrowing will be needed if this library project is approved by voters? Last month, Amanda Bonabunker, who is one of the library building specialists at the MBLC and has worked with us closely on this project, was quoted in the Gazette as saying current construction costs show per square foot costs of about $1,000 and total building costs of around $1,500 per square foot. She also noted that a building of 5,500 to 5,800 square feet could cost between 8.25 million and 8.7 million, almost exactly the cost estimate provided by Ryder Levitt Bucknell. That's the RLB firm that Brad was referring to, at 8.3 million. And she goes on to write, both Deerfield and Amherst have faced escalating costs on their library projects. Might that not be the case here too? If we will have to borrow more okay, so I'm just going to pause there because there is a question that I'm going to direct to Jim, but it's complex. So I've given you the background, and then escalating costs. Marianne, you want to take the first crack at that, please? Thank you.
Well, so I wanted to just go directly to that Amanda said that both Amherst and Deerfield have said that they've had escalated cost estimates. Amherst's original cost estimate was from 2016. And so that is 6 years ago. And construction costs have escalated a lot in the last 2 years. Amherst project is partially delayed because of obstruction in Amherst to their project. So their project was delayed even longer than just waiting for the grant. And had they built when they were originally offered their grant funds, they wouldn't see these cost overruns. It's the length of the time. And then Deerfield does not have a new cost estimate. The library director was misquoted in the newspaper. There has not been a new cost estimate done on the Deerfield project. They don't have any updated cost estimates on that project yet. So, okay. What was the other question?
I think this is actually, the second question is a Jim question. I mean, I think we have already sort of answered the question of like how we hope to contain costs, how much of any cost overrun or escalation would be the responsibility of the MBLC up to that $6 million cap. So I think I'm going to just leave that there, and put Jim in the hot seat for the next question, which is, if we will have to borrow more at a later date, why not borrow the full amount now and leave our reserves in place to take care of other infrastructure problems? And if any reserves are left over, then apply them to the library project. Jim, is that clear? Okay, go ahead, thanks.
I have a spreadsheet that might, because there's a lot that goes into the answer for that, and it might be best to walk through some of the project details and the costs and where we are, if that's okay.
Yeah, are you?
If we can all digest another spreadsheet, I suggest that.
That'd be great. Are you able to share your screen, or do we need to make you a co-host?
I think I can.
Great, thanks.
Can you all see that?
Yes, thank you. Reminding people that there is a view options at the top for many of us that allows you to make that bigger if you want it to. Okay, thanks.
And Kate, you said you might not be ready for the finance job, but Brad with his spreadsheet numbers, he sounds like he's finance committee material.
No kidding, right?
Yeah. So another spreadsheet, starting at the top, and these numbers all match up with what Brad presented. The total project cost is $6,392,079. The state grant is $3,947,126, which means Shutesbury needs to kick in $2,444,953. Okay, and that matches up, I think, pretty well with what? Okay, I see a thumbs up from Brad. Okay, then what I did down below is, can you all see the colors? There's like an orangey color and a green color. Okay, so the green color designates funding that's already in the bank, or it's already out there. We already have this funding. We have $252,700 in town funds, and this is mostly from the $25,000 a year that the town has agreed to put into capital and put away for a future library. Okay, the second item is the $323,854, which is in contributions, and that's all kinds of fundraising events and donations and collecting cans and all kinds of different things that have been going on, I guess, over at least 10 years. And then is the value of the land itself, where the library will be, and that's assessed at $57,528. So that all adds up to $634,082 that we already have set aside for our share of this new library. So that means we need to come up with And now I'm going into the orange color. That means we need to come up with $1,810,871 that would be our piece to contribute to this $6.4 million project, or about 28% of the total project is what we're looking to fund going forward. And what we have right now, and this starts to go into, I think it was Amanda's question. Right now, we're looking at, and what we're proposing for town meeting, we, the Finance Committee, are proposing, is $250,000 out of free cash, $238,000 out of capital stabilization, $150,000 out of stabilization. So these are three different cash accounts, reserve accounts that we have that are available for something like this, a project of this type. So that leaves us with also a remaining $1,172,871 that we suggest doing with debt and a debt exclusion. Okay, so that's what adds up to the 1.8 million of additional funds required, or the 28% that we need to come up with going forward. So that's some detail on the project itself. And the other answer, I would say, to Amanda's question, can you see this new page, this new spreadsheet page?
Yes.
Okay, so this page shows all of our current projects. And you can see where they stand in status, mostly approved, there's a couple pending, and where they are and how we are planning to, or proposing, how we're proposing we fund these different projects. Okay, so that's what this top section, this top left section is all about, is the current list of projects, what we expect them to cost, including the library, the $6,392,079 for the library. And then down below, we've got our cash balances. Okay, so again, this goes back to the three accounts that we talked about earlier, the three reserve accounts. As of the beginning of this fiscal year, we had $370,000 in capital stabilization. We had $456,000 in stabilization, and we had $1.174 million in free cash. Those are pretty high numbers, and I think there has been some discussion over the years as we've been gradually raising our funds, our reserve accounts. There's been some question, are we getting too high? But we do follow state guidelines. There is a range. There is a range from high to low of where we should be in that range with regard to our cash reserves. So 2 million is on the high side. Now, if we look at one other comment, we want to be conservative. There's one project that has not yet gone through the capital, or hasn't been fully approved yet, hasn't been fully finished. We need the cost estimate following an engineering study, and that's a school roof. But we know we need to do the school roof this year, this fiscal year, this upcoming fiscal year. So right now we've already approved 70,000, or excuse me, 60,000 for the engineering for the school roof. And we're plugging in what we believe is the highest number. We think it's going to be anywhere from 600 to 750,000 to actually do the school roof project. Okay, so this is not yet an approved project, but we expect it to be we expect the engineering work, if it's approved at town meeting, to go forward with that 60,000. We expect that work to be done quickly over the course of the summer. That will lead out to bidding for the project, and we expect that project to be completed in this upcoming fiscal year. Now, I'm sorry to talk about the school roof, but it's important because it's a big number, and it's also going to impact this this upcoming fiscal year's capital spending. So from a perspective of finance committee role or a position, we need to make sure we think of this and account for it when we're looking at our cash numbers. So going back down to the cash numbers, including financing the school roof, or this is what our ending cash balances would be after this list of projects. Capital stabilization would be at 245,000. Stabilization would be at 131. Free cash would be at 458,000 for a total of 834,000. Now we believe that's still in the range, but we've gone from the high end of the range to more on the lower end of the range of where we feel comfortable with regard to a cash position for the town. So I think that sort of answers most of what I think the question was. And it took 2 spreadsheets and some time to do that, but I think it also addresses some other questions. One other comment, we did talk about $1,172,871 that would be needed in a debt exclusion. And we've looked at that. Our treasurer, Ryan, has gone through the numbers with a bank, and with a 20-year loan with current, what they're giving him for current rates, looking at the average house value in town, which is right for this purpose is a $269,000 house. The impact on the average tax bill would be roughly $114,000. Excuse me, not 114,000. Just making sure you're all awake. $114. Okay, just $114 annually. Annual tax bill increase on the average house in Shutesbury. Okay, so Kate, I'll give it back to you.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
And I'll take this off, and we can always put it up if we need to.
Perfect.
And I see there's been Melanie's had her hand up. I don't know.
I just had a really quick question. That last question that was asked about the borrowing, was that also Amanda Knox, or was that someone else who asked that question for the meeting minutes?
So I'm sorry. The question about
the last question
from several different places. Okay, several different people are asking that question. I would say that the question about why we would not borrow more is essentially that's Amanda's question.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, maybe I didn't answer that directly, but what I will say is we look at our cash balances, and we're still in the range of where we think we're okay by what we have here. So we don't think we need to borrow the whole 1.8 million. Okay, we think we can work with that lower number and still have an ending cash balance that we think will work well for the town.
Okay, thank you very much, Jim. I do see a question in the chat which is sort of directly related, and then I'm trying to catch up here, but I'm trying to keep the conversation sort of making sense without skipping around too much. So Mateo asks, with all of these projects, including both the library and the school roof, as well as others, FinCom is still talking about spending less than half, 41% total, of free cash stabilization and capital stabilization funds. Is that correct, Jim?
Okay, it's a little more than half. We're going to end. Well, let me see here. Where are we? We've got. We're starting with 2 million and different. I'm not going to just focus on the free cash. I'm going to focus on all our reserves because all the reserves really are relevant here. But we're going to start with 2 million, and we'll go into the next year with 834,000, so less than half. And that'll get us to our free cash account will be at about 6.8% of budget, which is getting on the lower end of where we'd like to be, but it's still okay. And then 5.6% of budget for our stabilization accounts, which is also on the low end. But still okay, we think. Again, these kinds of accounts, you gradually build them up, and then you have, I don't know, you could call it a rainy day fund, and then projects come along and you need that money to spend. I guess I would call this more of a sunny day fund because you've got this opportunity here to work on a project, to take a project, and you've got the cash plus some debt, some relatively low end of debt, and pay for a project, pay 28% of a project. We're paying for 28% of it at this point going forward.
Thank you.
So again, I guess the message is to the answer to that question is we're spending more than half of our reserves over the course of this next fiscal year on projects.
Thank you. Okay, and then I'm just noting that Mateo's put a correction. So this is for the record because what is in the chat has to be spoken out loud. I don't think all of it does if it's not a question that we're answering, but I'd like a ruling on that actually. Trustees I know can't respond in the chat, but Mateo's correcting. He says, sorry, that's right. It would be 59%, so more than half spent. And then George.
Yeah, and to Mateo's question, the same even with the cash reserves account, that specific account, it is dropping more than half.
Right.
That specific account.
And then just noting that George, who's also on the FinCom, notes that the ending free cash estimate doesn't include additions to free cash when fiscal 22 is closed. And so that figure George expects to be higher. Sorry, I just realized I had my video off.
Yeah, I would say in general, this is, we try to be as conservative as possible because that's what finance committee people are supposed to be like. But we've got a high number in there for the roof. We've got no more fundraising plugged in here. We've got an assessed value on the land, which was assessed some time ago. We believe that land is going to probably turn out to be higher. I know Marianne or the team are looking to get an updated assessment. So there's a number of moving parts here that will contribute to the project. But at this point, we want to be conservative and not put anything in here that isn't locked in.
Thank you. I see a lot of hands going up. Tim, go ahead, please. I saw yours first.
Yeah, George and Jim, you might correct me if I state this incorrectly, but I believe a couple of years ago, we had a consultant come in to help establish fiscal policies. And after several meetings and discussions, the town adopted these policies, and those policies included percentages for cash. And if I'm correct, the allocations that you've done stay within those guidelines. So it's not that we're going way off in some unknown direction. These are guidelines that have been considered, and those percentages are fairly meaningful in that sense. George or Jim, if I said that incorrectly, please let me know.
No, that's correct. And I guess I tried to say that earlier, but maybe not very well. I guess my point I was trying to make is we're going from the high end of the range of the guideline to the low end of the range as far as the guideline, but we're still within the guidelines. Yeah, and that's why we have the belief that we don't need to go out and finance this project further than what we currently are proposing.
Thank you. So I see some other people, Eric and Jim, both who have experience on FinCon and now on Select Board for Eric. I do want to just make sure that we are answering questions rather than having a discussion. This is primarily intended to answer public questions. So So we've got a bunch of questions. So can I just ask Jim and Eric, do you all have questions that you're asking, or are you providing further answers? Jim, why don't you go first? I saw your hand, thanks.
Yes, so Jim Hemingway, Finance Committee. I would just like to point out that the original plan that the Finance Committee came up with was to use $225,000 from the cash reserves, or actually from capital stabilization, to pay for the dump truck, but then decided to move that expense, $225,000, and borrow instead. And I think it's only fair to say that $225,000 ought to be added to the $1,173,000 that everyone is proposing to borrow for the library. And so that would bring the total borrowing up to $1.4 million. And that's because this change was made by the Finance Committee. But really, we have to borrow $1.4 million and not $1.173 million. I realize this is a comment, not a question, but I would just like to point that out because that is a part of the history of our discussion on the Finance Committee about how to fund and also how to borrow, what amount of money we ought to be borrowing to pay for this new library.
Thank you, Jim. Eric, you're next, please, and then I'm going to go back to questions.
You're muted, Eric.
I think three very quick things. One is, I think George has made an excellent point about the fact that town almost always, I suspect this year too, will return some cash to the budget. Every year we do that, so that's going to happen again probably. Second of all, with regard to the school roof, we may not have who knows what our chance of getting it. I believe it's the 5th time we've applied for it, but there is a chance that we will get a good chunk of that will be reimbursed by the state with a loan we're looking for, or a grant rather we're looking for from the state. We won't know that right now, but there is a chance of that. It's not worth writing that number on any kind of spreadsheet, but it's out there. The third thing that maybe isn't really worth writing on the spreadsheet is we do have some ARPA funds, American Recovery Act funds. It could be used for the school roof. There's a great latitude that the select board has to apply those funds, of which I think there are about $525,000 of those funds. So there is a fair amount that could be used to that the select board could use to fund things like the school roof going ahead. That's all. I just add those things.
Yeah, I just need to make one comment to Eric, and it has to do with the ARPA. Right now, we did plug in some ARPA funding for the roof. So hypothetically, you know, it's a hypothetical project. There's a lot of different ways we might end up getting a grant. We're not counting on that. We don't want to bank on it. But we did plug in some ARPA money for the school roof.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. This is a complex thing to moderate, and I apologize. I'm going back to a couple of questions that are further back, but I missed at least one, and one is a question about, and I'm trying to find. I think this is Mike Binsky's question. It is. Mike's question is: the library is currently open 28 hours per week. Will this increase if a new library is built? Marianne, that seems to go straight to you, please. Thanks.
Not dramatically, but maybe a little bit. Most libraries in towns our size are open somewhere near 28 hours a week. You know, Leverett, last time I looked, was only open 20 hours a week. The Irving Library is open 30 hours a week. I think that's really kind of like a crystal ball question. We're going to get the building built, and then as we go through that process, think about how we might be operating it. But we're not planning to add more staff, so it won't be open it won't be open, 60 hours a week like libraries in much larger towns. But if the library director's time isn't monopolized by all of the extra time I spend doing things because I'm stuck in such a small space, or I'm going back and forth between multiple buildings, it might be that we could have more hours available.
Thank you. Also from Mike Binsky, this is emailed. Marion, I think this is for you too. How much did it cost to contract with Fennessy to do a second estimate, and where did this money come from?
So it was, off the top of my head, I think it was $1,350, and I paid for it with our library state aid account.
Thanks, Marianne. And I think this is the last question from Mike. And I'm going to read the whole context. At the April 27th Finance Committee meeting, the library director explained the design process for the library. So this is this is me speaking now, okay? The context being that we've accepted the grant at town meeting and the debt exclusion override vote, okay? That around July 1st, the MBLC will release about $300,000 to design the building and establish a firm cost. Marianne said that if the cost is too expensive, the town can walk away at that point. And Mike is asking, is this really an option that the MBLC has established? Who will make the decision whether the cost is too expensive? What exactly is the walk away process, and what will it take to walk away?
So yes, that is something that the MBLC has said. They said that they will, they'll release the funds for the design process that will require us to match it with 25%. So 100, somebody else do that math right now. So it's 300,000, so 100,000 of our money. And then we'll have a design. It'll be a real design, not just a schematic design, and we can get a cost estimate. And so this would be, 9 months later that we'd be getting that cost estimate. And then we'll have more information about whether or not costs have continued to escalate, and if a cost estimate is very different based on an actual design. And then we would, so town meeting will have appropriated a certain amount of money. And at that time, the town will decide to move forward. I can't speculate on a dollar amount. And in the meantime, we'll continue fundraising and looking for grants. But our cost estimate has cost escalations and contingencies built into it, and it is already it's a cost estimate projected for starting construction in 2023, so it's already higher than if we were building it now. So I don't have any magic numbers for Mike, but we as a town will continue to have this conversation.
Thank you. And Amanda, I see your hand raised. I've also seen you in the chat with your lot 032 question. Is this the same question that you're asking now, or is there a different one?
No, it's the same one. I can really abbreviate it if you want.
Yeah, I see that. I'll get to you. Okay, there's a couple of other people who are in line before you, but I'll get there. Okay. The next question that I'd like to address is, oh, y'all, this is a challenge. This is for Brad, I think, first. Why, this is Anna Hurd, and Anna's asking, why are more of the direct costs ineligible in Fennessy? And Brad, if it would help you to answer that, to put your spreadsheet back up, please feel free. Thanks.
No, the spreadsheet won't help. The two estimates are not totally the same. Fennessy included some things in its basic bid that the MBLC decided were ineligible. The MBLC is the group that comes up with that distinction. The estimators do not. The estimators do their job, and the MBLC goes through and says, oh, that is an ineligible cost, and oh, that one, and then they add that all up. And so in a nutshell, Fennessy had a slightly more detailed breakdown, and a few of those items in theirs were things that that MBLC, the RLB had left out. It comes out in the wash, but that's basically the answer.
Thank you, Brad. And then I have another question, or actually, I need to, for meeting law, I need to make sure that some of the key points in the chat are pulled out. And so Mateo is asking, do we know when the land was assessed? If it was before 2020, I'm sure it'll be worth much more now. I'm going to go ahead and answer that myself. The land was assessed as part of the application process, which didn't begin until last year. So this is a relatively recent assessment. It may be low, but we don't have any, we don't have any way of judging that right now. It's quite difficult to get a reassessment at the moment. So that's the value of the land that we have, and that's the value of the land that we're using. The MBLC does consider the value of the land as part of the town's share of the total costs. Okay, and then let's see, what else do we have in the chat? So some of these questions, I'm going to go ahead and get to Amanda's question. Are cleanup costs for lot 032 being figured into the cost of the proposed library? And the simple answer is no, they are not. Amanda goes on to write, the soil test at site B9 necessitated a release notification form to be filed with the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection. We are now considered a disposal site that needs to be remediated by specialists who might be very pricey. What will this cost? I'm going to get Becky, his hand is up first, and then Marianne, if you need to add to what Becky's saying. Does that seem good to y'all? Okay, Becky, over to you. Thank you.
Did Becky drop out?
Becky's muted.
Sorry about that. Just to be clear, what happened is when we made sure to check out every area on lot 032. So the area in question B9 is over 500 feet from the library site. Water was tested between that site and the B9 and showed no contamination. The B9 site is a leftover, it used to be owned by or controlled by the Army Corps of Engineers. And when they were there, they had an underground tank. Before they left the site, they went through a full cleanup process. Their contention is that the readings that we came across are right on the reportable line. The reportable line is at 100. They had some tests at 80, and I think what we came in with was just over at 100, exactly at 100. So what we have to do now is to hold them responsible. We'll be moving ahead this spring with OTO to do exploratory work and see if the range is any greater in any other spots, if there is need for remediation or not. And if there is, if it's discovered there's need for remediation, the Army Corps of Engineers will be held responsible. So that will dramatically minimize the cost to the town. And if there are any costs, the initial costs we will be using, we'll probably have to spend about $10,000 to do this process. And some of that money is already on hand in the budget and not a library cost at all. This has no relationship to the library.
Thank you, Becky. Marianne, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that it's that B9 is more than 500 feet from, so B9 is 600 feet from where Al Werner's test well is, and then
Okay, so
Al
it's
Werner's
like,
test well is like 500 feet.
so
and
it's about 1,000 feet in.
right, and gasoline doesn't travel more than 400 feet, and all the reports are on the Small Library Pilot Project webpage. Okay, thanks, Becky.
Thank you. Amanda, did you have a follow-up for that?
Yeah, I just want to say, I know that, you know, B9 is quite a ways from the proposed building site, but my question sort of had to do with the entire site, because any portion of apparently the site being remediated, it's like the whole site has to be remediated. So it's going to cost money. That was basically my question. You know, because we are considered this waste site now, what's going to happen, what might the cost be? And I do kind of attribute it to the library, because my impression is that if we hadn't discovered it, maybe we wouldn't have to deal with it. But because of the library plans, you know, the testing was done. So it seems like to roll it into the library costs kind of makes sense. And actually, as far as the Army Corps of Engineers go, I guess they were responsible, but it didn't sound like they were being held responsible necessarily, because the DP did say that we must employ or engage in LSP to manage any cleanup, and that we are the owners and the responsible parties, i.e. the town of Shutesbury. So anyway, that's why I was asking. Thank you.
Becky, I see you have a response. Go ahead, please.
Yep. So I've had conversations with DEP regarding this issue. That we are following what Amanda's seeing is all the appropriate paperwork, as she should. But the Army Corps is, you know, they are the ones who had the gasoline out there, and they will be held responsible if it's proven that we do need to do remediation. Because the town didn't even own the property when it was contaminated, and it goes back to the person who contaminates the property and has responsibility for cleaning up the contamination.
Thank you. I see, Jim, that you have your hand raised. Go ahead, please.
Yes. Well, unfortunately, we are responsible for this, regardless of whether the Army Corps of Engineers or the military or whomever were responsible for the spill. The point is that come January 28th, 2023, we're going to have to clean this up within 5 years. That's the law. And if the Army Corps of Engineers is available, they might come in and do it. But I think it's a long shot to believe that the Army Corps of Engineers is going to be able to swing by Shutesbury and take care of this problem once OTO figures out what has to be done and submits a report to Mass DEP. So this may wind up being a rather expensive future cost. We don't know at this point. It's completely unknown. I think the Army Corps of Engineers personally is tied up with dealing with the Mississippi River and other places around the country. And I don't think Shutesbury is high on their list of, I don't think we're going to get taken care of by them anytime soon. But regardless, we have 5 years to clean it up. From next January, and that's the law.
Thanks, Jim. Becky has a response, and then I know that we are just a few minutes away from our closing time, so I'm going to move us past this, please. Thanks. Go ahead, Becky.
We will be finding out exactly what the situation is, but I've had the direct correspondence and direct discussions. We will be following up on this matter. We couldn't do it in the middle of winter. We're doing it in the spring. I'm sorry it couldn't be completed before today, so the questions would be wouldn't be here, but it's an ongoing process. And unlike the fire station where we were, where there was no one else responsible that we could turn to, we are in a different position on this situation, on this contamination.
Thank you very much. Mike, you have another question in the chat about the ARHS track that I'm going to rule as not a library question. It is a big picture for the town question that I think is appropriate to ask at town meeting. What FinCom has to say about that. If there is a FinCom person who wants to address that in like the remaining minute, I'm fine with it. But to my mind, that's not really a question about the library, and so it's optional for the FinCom if someone wants to take a crack at Mike's question. I can't see y'all. If any FinCom member is willing to address this now, raise your hand. Otherwise, Mike, I'm going to respectfully let it pass. Okay, I am not seeing any hand raised, so I think we're just going to let that one go. I believe that we have gone through all of the questions that we've received in the chat and via email.
No, Kate, there are a couple of questions and I'm not sure why you're not seeing them.
Okay.
So I'll just read them. So Mateo asked, he said he's glad to see that there would be something approaching appropriate stack space in a new library. Are all of Shutesbury's library materials currently housed in the existing library, or are any materials being housed in other possibly non-archival spaces? Are we putting at risk any library materials that we may have already bought with taxpayer money if we don't provide a material appropriate space for them? Not really. There's a small collection of very old books over in the old town hall. They were put there before I started as library director. I haven't looked at them in years, but I would be surprised. But I've been thinking about looking at them only because I'm concerned that they'd be covered with mold and they should probably just be disposed of. The thing that happens, Mateo, with library books is that we have to weed more aggressively. So because the library is so small and we have a community of voracious library users who always want new materials, we're always buying new stuff, and we are forced to weed more aggressively. But we don't have things stored in other places. That there are no other town storage places that would be appropriate to store things. And let me see if I have any other questions. I think that might be the only one that I saw.
Wow, we did this almost like right on time. It's impressive. I'm just checking
Kate?
one more time. Go ahead, please, Jim.
Yeah, I know you want to be right on schedule, but just following up on what Mary Ann was doing, there's a couple there that are related to finance committee that I want to just do the same thing that Mary Ann was doing.
Go right ahead, please.
Yeah, one had to do with, it was from Les Luchanik, and he wanted to know the vote from the finance committee on funding projects. And I think it was 5-2 was where we ended up. So that was one. The other came from AJ, and he wasn't sure whether I said it or not about regarding the school roof project. I did say I might have garbled it, or AJ might have tuned out for a bit, but the answer is the scenario, the cash reserves ending balances do reflect fully funding the roof project. and not going with a grant or other options. So for purposes of this exercise and with the cash balances we looked at, the full cost of the roof is included. So sorry for causing you to go over by a minute.
I think I'll forgive you for that. All right. I would really like to thank everyone who's participated. Thank everyone for their thoughtful questions. Thank you, FinCom committee members and others for your providing answers, and of course, Marianne and Brad, and other trustees who've spoken out, notably Tim. I really feel that the importance of people watching this process carefully has helped us do a better job as trustees, helped us devise a building program that we hope will be both affordable and wonderful for our town. And thank you all so very much for joining in and participating tonight. We'll wrap it up. I declare the meeting of the trustees is adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Have a good one.
Becky, I forgot to thank you. I'm sorry.
Oh no, I felt included. Good night.
Thanks.
Good night, everyone. I'm going to end the meeting. Okay.